Today is 7/28 or 7/27/14. And my title for the lesson is, Where is Your Heart? Where is your heart? Let's turn to Exodus chapter 14. Exodus 14. And here we have Israel. They have left Egypt, and now they are by the Red Sea. And so now, Pharaoh, God has hardened Pharaoh's heart, and now Pharaoh is now after Israel to bring them back to Egypt. And so Israel is stuck by the Red Sea. And so now they see the Egyptians coming their way to take them back to Egypt. And so now, in Exodus 14 and verse number 10, it says this, And as Pharaoh drew near, the sons of Israel looked, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they became very frightened. So the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us in this way, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Now notice here, when it's crunch time. Okay? All right? And so now, they're being pursued by the Egyptians. And so now, what comes out of their mouths? Christ says, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Okay? So now, while they were in Egypt, they told Moses, Leave us alone. Leave us here. Okay? When God leads them out of Egypt, now they are by the Red Sea, and the Egyptians are pursuing them. What comes out of their mouth? Okay? We should have died in Egypt. Okay? Where is their mindset? Where is their heart? Their heart is back in Egypt. All right, now, of course, what does God do? He opens the Red Sea. They walk through the Red Sea. Now, while they were in Egypt, what was God doing? He was doing miracles in Egypt. And they saw the great power of God in Egypt. And they were still telling Moses, Leave us alone. So now they're here by the Red Sea. God does another great miracle. He opens the ocean. They walk through the ocean. Okay? They walk through the Red Sea. They make it. And then the Egyptians come into the Red Sea, and God closes his back. So God saves Israel. He does a great miracle. And now in chapter 15, Israel is singing praises to God. Okay? All right, but now, let's go to chapter 16. It says in verse 1, They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the sons of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departure from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the sons of Israel said to them, Would that we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt. There it is again. When we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you had brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. So now, the people have nothing to eat at this point, And what do? They say to Moses in verse number 3, would that we had died in the land of Egypt. Once again, where is their heart? It's back in Egypt. Let's go to chapter 17. Exodus 17. And here the people have no water. Okay, verse 1. Then all the congregation of the sons of Israel journeyed by stages from the wilderness of Sin, according to the command of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said to them, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord? But the people thirsted there for water, and they grumbled against Moses and said, here we go again, why now have you brought us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? Now notice here, okay, there's a pattern, okay, all right, always mentioning Egypt, which is behind them, all right, which is not their land, okay, which is slavery, which is oppression, all right, which is no love, okay, and they always want to go back to that situation, all right, and they always say to Moses, you have brought us out here to kill us, okay, so now there's a theme there. We want to go back to Egypt, okay, and their perception of Moses, which is really of God, is that you want to kill us. Okay? Now, if that is true, how come God did not just kill you in Egypt? Okay? All right? How come God did all those great miracles in Egypt, opened the Red Sea, and does all these things, if He wants to bring you out here just to kill you? Okay? So you see, when the heart is not right, when the heart is not right, there is always, I want to go back to a situation that is oppressive. Okay? To a situation that doesn't belong to me. Alright? That is not my land. Alright? So when the heart is not right, the heart loves to be oppressed. Alright? So here we go. If a Christian's heart is not right, a Christian is going to love to worry. Because worry is oppression. When you start to worry, do you feel light in your soul or do you feel heavy? Heavy. Okay? Here's oppression from a Christian. Okay? I will seek out other Christians who also want to go back to Egypt. Okay, who also want to be under oppression, who don't want to live victorious Christian lives. All right, so as I said last week, tell me about how hard it is to be a Christian. Because boy, it's hard sometimes, and I'm just trying my best. That's oppression talk. Okay, that's slavery talk. That's not victory talk. So Israel, they are God's people. God chose them, but they are choosing to be disobedient. Therefore, their heart isn't right. Therefore, they misinterpret God's plan. All right? And they are always thinking about Egypt, and they're always thinking about death. We're going to crash and burn. We're going to crash. This is not going to work out. This is not going to work. Their heart's not right. Okay? So now they want to go back and be under oppression, and they have a mindset of death. Okay? And that's why death is always coming out of their mouths. You're going to kill us, Moses, out here? Okay? We're going to die out here. Death is always on their tongue. And so when a Christian wants to go back to oppression, death is always on the tongue. In other words, things are not going to work out. And and always looking for the crash and burn mentality. It's not going to work out. It's not going to work. I'm telling you, this is not going to work out. Okay? And so now, God has a plan to give them their own property. And in Ezekiel, it says that this land is the center of all the earth. Ezekiel 38. And in Ezekiel 20, God says he searched out this land. This is the best land. So God has the best. But their mindset is, we're going to crash and burn. Let's go back to Egypt. Let's fast forward to Numbers chapter 14. In Numbers 13, they sent out spies to check out the promised land. And guess what the spies came back with? The same word. We can't take it. We can't do it. The people are too strong for us. And see, what happens is that what God has for us, if the habit of the mind and the heart is, let's always go back to oppression, and things are going to crash and burn. When God finally brings what he has, it's too late to change the thinking. It's too late. Okay? Because the habit of the mind is death and destruction and oppression. Okay? So now it is too late. So now in chapter 14, verse 1, they say this. Then all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, here we go again, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. You see, once again, preoccupied with death. And God is preoccupied with life, not death. Okay? But they are preoccupied with death. Verse 3. And why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become plunder. Would it be better for us to return to Egypt? All right? And so now, let's go to verse 14 and verse 11. It says, and the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people spurn me, and how long will they not believe in me, despite all the signs which I have performed in their midst? I will smite them with pestilence and dispossess them, and I will make you into a nation greater and mightier than they. Now, earlier in chapter 14, who spoke up? Joshua and Caleb. Okay? They said, we can take it. All right? We can take it. But the people did not want to hear it. All right? So, God says, later on in chapter 14, okay, what the people have said, that's what I'm going to do. Okay? They said that I'm going to kill them. So, since they said that, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Okay, you know what? They are preoccupied with death and me killing them. So I'm going to give them what they want. Okay? And God says, I hear what they are saying about me in their tents. And see, what does God hear us saying about him in our tents? In our houses. Okay? In our thoughts. Okay? Does God hear us saying, we're going to crash and burn? Oh, God, you're going to kill us? In other words, God's not going to work out? Or does God hear us saying, you know what, it's going to work out? It's going to work out. And see, God gives us ultimately what we want. Okay? At first, he's going to try to work with us to get us what he wants. But ultimately, you want that? I'm going to give you what you've been saying. Okay? What's really in your heart. So Israel, I'm going to kill all y'all in the desert. Okay? All right? But I want to look at a man named Caleb. Okay? Let's go to Joshua chapter 14. Joshua 14. And here it is, Israel, they have now entered the promised land. And this is 40 plus years later. And so now Caleb said to Israel, 45 years ago, we can take the promised land. But the other 10 spies discouraged the people, all right? And because the spies discouraged the people, God said once again, y'all will die in this wilderness, and for 40 years, you are going to wander around. Which means that what? Caleb, who said we could take the land, he had to wander in the desert for 40 years when he had the proper faith. He spoke what was right. He said we can take it. But because they sinned against God, now he has to suffer. And for 40 years in the wilderness, he has to walk around, and it's not even his fault. Okay? All right? And see, where was his heart? His heart was with God. But he has to suffer for the people's sake. It's not even his fault. And see, as a Christian, what is the Bible showing? That when we do what is right, okay, we will go through things, and it's not even our faults. Okay? Just like Caleb. It wasn't his fault that he had to wander through that vast desert. Okay? He was faithful. And for 40 years, he has to walk amongst unfaithful people because they grumbled against God. Okay? But let's see his attitude. Now he's in the promised land. And it is now time for Caleb to inherit his stuff. Okay? Joshua 14, starting at verse 7, says this. Let's read verse 6. Then the sons of Judah drew near to Joshua in Gilgal. And Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, you know the word which the Lord spoke to Moses, the man of God, concerning you and me in Kadesh Barnea. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought word back to him as it was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt with fear. But I followed the Lord my God fully. Now see, just real quick. When your heart is right, you claim God as your own. He says in verse 8, but I followed the Lord my God fully. Verse 9. So Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land on which your foot has trodden shall be an inheritance to you and to your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God fully. And now, behold, the Lord has let me live just as he spoke these 45 years, from the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses when Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, behold, I am 85 years old today. I am still as strong today as I was in the day Moses sent me. As my strength was then, so my strength is now for war and for going out and coming in. And it goes on. And he says, now, give me my stuff. Okay? And what does he do? He goes to Hebron, goes to war, and he gets his stuff. Okay? But notice his mindset. Okay? All right? It is now 45 years later. And he is still claiming, this is my God. Okay? You see, for 40 years, when he was wandering in the desert, because Israel sinned against God, and it wasn't his fault. He did not blame God. He didn't say, oh God, why me? What's going on? This is not right. Okay. He did not say, God, this is year 10 of me wandering in the desert. I'm tired of this. I'm going to do something right now. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to go to the promised land and get my stuff. Okay. That was his mindset. Okay? At year 10, he was like, I'm just going to wait on the Lord. I'm going to wander around. Year 15, I'm waiting on the Lord. Okay, year 20, I'm waiting on the Lord. Year 30, I'm waiting on the Lord. Okay, all right. He did not jump the gun. He did not get angry at God, but he waited on the Lord. And once again, in verse number 8, he claims God as his own. And he had to wait 45 years to get this blessing. And it wasn't his fault. And God put him in that predicament. God is the one who put Caleb in that predicament, but he's still saying, my God, showing I am faithful to God. I'm not going to turn my back. And no wonder. You see, what is God showing us? He is showing us that I'm going to put you in a predicament. It's me doing it. But you have to wait for me, okay? You have to wait on me to give you your stuff. When I say it's time, that's when it's time. And now, when it's that time, will you still be claiming me as your God? That's the test. And Caleb passed it. He passed the test. All right? And so, where was his heart? He is showing my heart is with the Almighty God. Because he wasn't saying, let's go back to Egypt. He wasn't saying, we're going to die in this wilderness. You see, when they didn't have anything to eat, or when Israel was by the Red Sea, and now here comes the Egyptians, he wasn't the one saying, uh-oh, we're going to die. He wasn't saying that. Okay? Then in chapter 16 of Exodus, they had no food. He didn't say, we're going to die out here in this wilderness. Let's go back to Egypt. In chapter 17, they had no water. He didn't say, we have no water, Moses. We should have stayed in Egypt. We're going to die. He wasn't saying that. You see, what was his habit of mind? God is my God. He's going to take care of us. That's who my God is. We can do it. We can do it. We can do it, Israelites. That's right. We can do it, church. We can do it. Our God's going to come through. Our God's going to come through. So now, when it came 45 years later, he had the same mindset that he had earlier in his life. It did not change. My God is able, so give me my stuff. Yes. But he had to go through the wilderness. Okay? Just like we have to go through the wilderness. And God will give us what he has promised. But we have to sit still and wait on the Lord. Okay? Wait on the Lord. Because imagine if Caleb would have jumped the gun and said, I'm going to go to the promised land and get my stuff. Okay? It would not have worked. All right? Or it would have failed. But he trusted and he waited on God and he claimed God as his own. And ultimately, the way God does things is that God does things according to his time schedule, and everything is timely. In John chapter 7, Jesus' own brother said, if you want to be famous, okay, do all this stuff in front of the whole world. And Christ says to his own brothers, for you, any time is right. Okay? For you, any time is right. But Christ knew that it wasn't time yet. All right? Okay? So, but for you, any time is right. And see, God's mindset, no, not just any time is right. Okay? Things must go according to my time schedule. Okay? So for mankind, is that any time is right. Okay? And let's just do this, and let's just do it. Okay? God is saying, no. Okay? The way I do things, I do things in increments. Okay? All right? What did God do with Israel? Okay? He started Israel with Abraham. All right? Abraham had no children. Then he gave Abraham a son. Isaac had Jacob. Then Jacob had 12 sons. Then he sent one of those sons, who was Joseph, into Egypt to be the ruler of Egypt. Then God had a famine in the whole world, and Joseph's brothers had to go to Egypt. And through Joseph, Israel was saved in Egypt. And while in Egypt, Israel grew to multiple numbers. And as they grew, then it came time for them to leave Egypt to get their own land. You see how God does things? Okay. God did not birth Abraham, or he did birth Abraham in the promised land. All right. But then ultimately, he took him out of the promised land, okay, through the sons of Jacob. But then later on, he brought them back. Okay. But God does things in increments. Okay. All right. So now with our Christian lives, God does things in increments. I'm going to take you here. Now I'm going to take you here. Then I'm going to take you here. Then I'm going to take you here. Okay? It's not just rush through, just do something. No, that's mankind. Okay? All right? But God is increments. And see, in each increment, he's growing us up. Then we go to the next one. We go even further. Then we go to the next one. We grow just like Israel. Okay? They had to grow in numbers first. Then God brought them back to the promised land. All right? He did not bring them back in small numbers. Okay? But he let them grow to a mass number, where now they are a great number of people. Now you are equipped to live in this great vast land that I have for you. Okay? But if it's just a few people, you're not equipped. You have to grow to a large number of people first. Then I'm going to bring you back. But also, you have to first get to know me. Get to know who I am. Because now I am choosing you, Israel. You're not choosing me. I've chosen you. We did not choose God. He chose us. All right? So now, since God chose us, we have to get to know who this God is. And number two, we have to grow up spiritually. Then what he has for us, he's going to give us. All right? Just like with Israel. Once again. But Israel, the first group, failed. Because they were always looking back to oppression. And see, God is not a God of oppression. He's a God of life. And so God doesn't want to oppress us. Okay? All right? And so with that, he's teaching us who I am, who he is. I'm not a God of oppression. I'm a God of grace. I'm a God of love. I'm a God of mercy. I'm a God of kindness. I'm a God of blessing. And see, what happens is that we start to learn, who this God is, and we start to let him treat us like he wants to. Oh, you mean, God, I can just be and you just love me? Yes. And when it comes to this congregation, you tell Christians, oh yeah, we have a congregation. Oh, so what are you guys doing? That's the first thing. What are you guys doing? As in terms of works. What are you guys? When the first question should be, are you guys learning about Jesus? That should be the number one question. Are you learning about Jesus? And see, learning about Jesus is really a state of being. We're just learning about Him. That's number one. Because if we just rush out and just start doing stuff and we're not learning about Jesus, guess what's going to happen? The people come in, okay, all right, and all of a sudden, if we're not learning about Jesus, we got a whole lot of mess. Because we're not learning His ways. We're not learning His thoughts. And that's where a lot of church mess comes in. Okay? All right? Because are we learning about Jesus? And see, if we're not learning about Jesus, back to Bible study, we're all selfish. I want my way, you want your way, and there's conflict. Okay? And all of a sudden, we start to bicker and fight over what is not spiritual. Over chairs. Over stuff. Over money. That has nothing to do with learning about Jesus. Okay? But see, if we're learning about Jesus, then God says, and we're growing spiritually, then God will say, okay, now it's time, okay, for the promised land mentality to come into play. Okay? Because now you have grown to a certain level, and now you're able to handle people. Okay? Because everything in life, want to get married, it involves another person. Okay? Want to have a business, it involves other people. Whatever we want to do in life always involves other people. Okay? And so now, that means that now we have to learn the ways of Jesus to handle other people properly. To handle marriage properly, we have to know the ways of Jesus. To handle business properly, we have to know the ways of Jesus. To handle the congregation properly, we have to know the ways of Jesus. To handle money properly, which involves other people, we have to know the ways of Jesus. And so, God is doing things with us in increments. Okay? He puts things on our heart, and just like with Caleb. Okay? Caleb never lost the desire to have stuff in the promised land. Because that was God's desire. So he never lost that desire, just like all of us. We have desires, okay, that God puts on our hearts. But let Him teach us the ways of Jesus. Because dealing with people and the ways of Jesus and glorifying God is not just a hop, skip, and a jump. It is, you're dealing with my glory. This is not a hop, skip, and a jump. Okay? You're dealing with my work, my desires, my purpose. So now, I'm going to do things in increments and equip you along the way. And along the way, you're going to be growing. And then, 45 years later, Here you go, Caleb. There you go. And see, what did he say? He is now 85 years old, and he says, I am still as strong today as I was 45 years ago. What did God do? He sustained his physical strength so that he will inherit what God says he was going to inherit. What is that showing? That God is able to do what he plans to do or what he plans to give you, and he is able to sustain you until you get what he has promised. God suspended that natural law of his body getting older. But see, everybody else who failed to believe, they died and they got older. But Caleb stayed the same age physically. Faithfulness, God steps in, and he's able to do with you supernaturally what he won't do with someone else because of their lack of faith. Trust him. Trust him. Trust him. Trust him. Okay? And so, God is a God that, yeah, he'll take his time. He'll take his time because, you know, he controls everything. So he can take his sweet time. But he knows what he is up to. He knows his plans. So as we trust him, okay, as we trust him, then we will be the Calebs of the Church of Christ, being Christians. God is good. And so, in obedience to the gospel, one must put on Christ in water baptism. And so, when one does that, then one is now able to now walk with God and be just like Caleb and claim God as my God. And God will do wonders and miracles in your life. And so with that, if we're here also, and we need prayer as we stand and sing, let it be made known to the church.